This episode of Heroes of the Horn is brought to you by our Taviran, Lady Amanda of House Ryan.
Yeah, man. Super excited here, Sir Ezra.
Yeah. We're into it. We're into the meat of it, my friend. I mean, we had the teaser, the welcome, we covered the prologue, and here we go. So this is exciting. It's a great way to kind of start, the new year off and just get us going. So
yeah, the wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
Yeah.
It's great. I'm certainly enjoying my time so far, albeit somewhat limited here in the Wheel of Time. I know we have a lot of our listeners. This is their first read as well. So yep. I think that's great. We're going to have people who have read this for their 100th time and people who are reading this for their first time. But either way, we're glad that you guys are joining us on our journey.
Yeah. Well, and we wanted to create a place that was just a safe book club, a place where people could come and chat and discuss the series. And, so if you've been around and you've read the series or what have you, we expect you to kind of be a guide by the side, if you will, and help others out. So we've got some cool kind of, we've got a spoiler series. We have, I look back in the Wheel of Time history, and we then have our main read through here, which is a lot of fun. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's gonna be fun. I think we have come up with a pace for this book. I think it's gonna be pretty good. We're gonna do 2 episodes a month. So this episode we're gonna cover chapters 1 through 9. Then I believe we're covering 10 through 17. And so, Ez has gone through, since he is far more familiar with this series than I am. Like, okay, I think this is a good chunk. This is a good chunk, so I think we'll get through this. It's gonna about April we'll be finished with the first book.
Yeah, by I think March 15th will be our final part to this first book, and I'm actually posting over on Patreon just it's kind of a reading schedule / episode guide for folks, and you can go click on that and see which dates we're going to be posting. So the 1st of every month, and then also the 15th. And that also, so we'll post those in the main feed. We will also be posting on those same days, the 1st and the 15th, on our Patreon series there as well too. So
yeah, so it's great. It's just absolutely great. So
yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on over to a hero's welcome. Ez, how you doing, man?
Dude, I'm doing well, and this has been we spent probably, an hour, 2 hours. Just pouring over this doc and talking about Wheel of Time and getting ready. It's fantastic. One of my favorite things to do, and I almost did this yesterday. So I'm from Columbus. For those of you who are, we've got listeners coming from other projects and people who are coming in here new. Columbus, Ohio, and we have about 5 or 6 half-price bookstores. And I love to just go do a tour and just go around and see what you can find. And it's amazing, dude. That's where I found most of my hardcover, Wheel of Time series books, because they're,
right.
Now I don't know if you know this, like the new covers are coming out now. So books 1, 2, and 3. You actually, if you wanted to get like a paperback version of that, I even went to the store, my local bookstore here, and I tried to order just the paperback version, and they said, well, if we order it new now, we can only get the new kind of covers. And I'm like, wait, I want the old style. I want that awesome artwork that's on those covers. So I ended up having to go find bookstores that still had them on the shelf. They're going to sell what they have, but any new inventory that they buy, they're buying these newer covers, which also look pretty cool. And if you're just getting into it, I think it's that's a fair way to go. But man, I tell you what, so that was recently what I've been up to. I've just been on the weekend driving around trying to find more of those. Something else I'm looking for, by the way, there's like a role-playing game or version of Wheel of Time, which I didn't know about. In my research I was looking up, I found some cards, a card deck at a I found one at a half-price bookstore, and I was like, what is this? And I started doing some more work, and then in conversations, we've been talking to Ariel Burgess, the sort of the big, the official kind of Wheel of Time illustrator, which is pretty cool. So she's been we've been talking with her. We got a secret little special something we're working on with her, but she did a lot of those illustrations for that stuff.
Yes.
And
yes.
I was shocked. It was just super cool to kind of get into it and learn about these different things. And you remember it was almost like a year ago. Maybe it's been longer than that. I was looking at what is it called? It's the Robert Jordan Con. Remember I was talking about that?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you remember I said like it was funny to me that some of these guys, let's see, Robert Jordan Con. Let me see if that's what I think it's called, Jordan Con. Yeah, okay. So and just it's funny when you get into research and you start talking to different people, what they can kind of lead you into, because this whole book club and covering this series has me, going to Half Price Books, looking for those things, collecting hard copy or hardcover editions, as well as looking at Jordan Con and saying, well, I think it's another con we got to throw on the list of ones
Absolutely.
we go to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I don't know. It's just, it looks like there's one coming up here in April, actually. So right after we finish the first book. So I'm afraid to take Sir Matt there, though, because I don't want too much spoiled
It'll
for
be
him.
spoiled. Yeah, it'll be spoiled.
Can't trust those guys down there. So, but man, I've been good. I'm like just super stoked. I'm ready to go for the new year, and we've just been making all sorts of gains, just trying to really, I don't know, be better people, be just immersed in our content, and I don't know, man, just get the most out of life that we can. 2020 we're seeing clear, okay? Now
Yes,
maybe my LASIK had something to do with that as well, but we're seeing clear. So, but how have you been, man? How's it going out there in Portland?
I'm good, man. Again, hey, we're just cranking out content here with our other this and our other shows as well, and it's just good, man. It's just good to be like, all right, I'm going to spend this whole day in my makeshift studio I have here.
Yeah.
And my office is just good. So, loving all of the new fandoms. Obviously, we do some other podcasts. A lot of Star Wars is now with Rise of Skywalker and The Mandalorian winding down. It's like, all right, boom. So now that kind of frees up a little bit. I don't think we're going to get really any Game of Thrones news until probably Comic-Con with that new show and stuff like that. So it's like, all right, so now this is kind of my first, I don't want to say like it's my number one podcast that I'm focusing on, but it's certainly like this one is going to be where the bulk of my research and stuff like that is going to shift over to here a little bit with those kind of winding down.
Yeah, which I think is pretty cool. The way the fandoms that we picked and the way we've looked at this, like it is nice that one will be peaking at this time, and then you got something else peaking over here later on. So that is helpful. And I tell you what, the amount of digging you did into these books, this book today for some of the passages you wanted to read and stuff, I'm like, let's go. Sir Matt is in there getting after it, and it's awesome, man. I love talking to you after you've read something too, because you're just like, one, wanting to know more, but then two, just like it's awesome, it's epic, and you're just like following this character,
right? And
you're watching these all of these characters actually from the Two Rivers just develop and grow, and it's such a epic hero journey. I don't know, man. It's
and so far I've only read to chapter 17, so there's probably going to be an episode 2 where I'm either caught up to where we're at, or I'm just just the way Ez and I record the next segment ahead. But yeah, I mean, so far, I mean, even going back, and I've gone back over this a couple of times. I've done the reading twice, and every time you go back, you just find something new, and it all just seems more and more and more important. So I can tell that this is going to be a series that there are lines in this first book that will become important in the fourth, fifth, as we progress down, just because as I did this first segment, then I moved on to the second segment, which is chapter 17, and came back and to do this to get ready for this episode. I was like, well, that ties in there and that ties in there, and that's I'm not even halfway through the first book yet. So
right. I know, man. It's really cool. It's just a lot of fun going through, and it's funny too, because the things that you bring up, I'm like, dang, that is like, because I kind of, knowing what happens, I sort of sometimes will gloss over bits of foreshadowing that take place. I'm like, no, that's actually really cool to hone in on. So I can't wait for you to talk about your segment today, just in we'll get to it, Rand and how significant he is. But before we get there, so that's our heroes welcome, just getting kind of caught up, and we're going to go over these segments with you guys just so you kind of get used to the format of the show. So then from there we move into Village Council, and we said this last time. There is a women's circle. Okay, it's out there. We're not a part of it. We're not allowed to know what goes on there. But here in the Village Council, we discuss various things. And I put the show news in there because I wanted this more to be.
But that's not saying that we won't have some women on here and they can discuss what's going on in the women's circle.
I hope
we're men and that's what it seems like the rules are. So
they're right. We're bound to the rules. We don't know. Tell us what to do. And actually, what's kind of cool is we really do plan on having some of our listeners on.
Absolutely.
It's kind of a staple for you and I. Like when over with Bend the Knee, we love to have Raven's Nest and have different individuals on. And I actually think we have, if you guys do check out our Patreon reward tiers there, especially if you're a Taviran or higher, there's definitely a high likelihood that you could be on the spoiler episode or just even do some Village Council with us. So that would be a lot of fun if you decide to do that. But moving into that, I mean, one of the things I wanted to talk about here, as we transition from a Hero's Welcome and then into the Village Council and talk about show news, there's a lot going on with that. And I actually would love for folks, if you're interested in sending us just an email or something or updates, or if you guys are following the Twitter. Let me go up here to their Twitter real quick. So the Wheel of Time on Prime is where they're kind of communicating with us just about updates on the show. And Rafe Judkins is kind of giving people, they started this whole, hashtag Twitter of Time, which was hysterical. People picked characters and had a blast with that. But then Wheel of Time Wednesday is a big thing. They used to drop information on Wednesdays about, casting and different things. They dropped a couple like promo reels of the writers and a first read through. I think we got like a kind of the reaction of the cast reading the first episode, I think is what that was. And we've got tons of different casting announcements there. But now they've said they're going to release stuff just sort of at random or whenever things come up or whenever they're available to. They're not going to wait till just Wednesdays. They're going to start posting updates and photos on any given day of the week. So make sure you're following there. We also retweet a lot of what they are, saying over on our Twitter as well. So the Horn of Valyr, you can check that out there. But yeah, man, it's exciting, and it's kind of crazy to see how much they've progressed. And here's an interesting thing. I also cover a like the Lord of the Rings on Prime as well with my buddy Lane. On an Unexpected podcast. And did you know, Sir Matt, that they're kind of doing this thing where they might be filming like the first couple episodes and then seeing how that goes, and it's almost like they're writing season 2 at the same time, or it's already like pre-written.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
It's pre-written, and then they're kind of weaving some of that into the first season. So they're doing that for
okay.
Lord of the Rings, and I think it would be interesting if they did it for Wheel of Time, just because, like, you're trying to make sure. What it is, I think they're planning for success. I think you believe the first season's going to land, it's going to do well, but you know how a good TV show has sort of like little nuggets or things that like you laid a foundation for some character twist or some character development, and I think they're really looking into that. And it just makes me feel, I think, better about like Prime doing this TV show and having the rights to this series. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah. No, it's good. I mean, it's Amazon, and Amazon is pushing Prime hard. I mean, they are really trying to compete. They've already got a handful of shows. The Jack Ryan is big. They've got Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. They've got I think Man in the High Castle was theirs as well. I don't really watch a lot of Prime, so I'm not super familiar with it because again, it certainly seems smaller than Netflix and even Disney Plus.
Yeah.
But they're constantly building and they're pushing more and more money into it. So I imagine that this is going to be their, hey, this is what we want to be our like Game of Thrones, right? I mean, the Netflix came out with The Witcher. That's kind of their response to that. So I think that's where we're going to be looking at here with Amazon.
Yeah, it's neat that they're pushing these fantasy series the way that they are, and they got two good ones. I mean, having Lord of the Rings and then having Wheel of Time, like, dude, they're really I mean, that probably cost them a pretty penny, but I'm all for it. Throw everything in there and go crazy. And it looks like just the showrunner and some of the writers have been super just enthusiastic about the series, and so that makes you feel good, just because, I don't know, it like you almost want, not saying you want fan service, but you definitely want somebody who is a fan and who's
absolutely
somewhat immersed in what has gone on in the series and what some of the Reddit discussions have been and some of the viral stuff that's taken place just in its evolution and things. So yeah, I don't know, real excited for that. So I'm not going to go over any. I think maybe the 15th we'll go over some names and stuff. Some of these characters or these actors, I don't know. Some of them I've never, seen in anything, and I'm just unfamiliar with, and so I'm kind of excited to see who they are. And I think that's also a good thing, don't you? That maybe they're unfamiliar to us?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of these characters that were in Game of Thrones, you go back to season 1 of Game of Thrones, I don't know who some of these people are. You look at Stranger Things, I didn't know who some of these people are, with the exception of like Winona Ryder. But I think that's always that seems to end up working out pretty well. Is you're going to be building these people into stars, and then you don't necessarily, some people have told us with Star Wars they didn't like that they brought in big actors, right? And so they always found Samuel L. Jackson in Star Wars kind of offsetting or kind of just, it didn't feel right.
Sure.
And so it goes both ways. Sometimes you're like, oh, this person's going to be in it, I think it's going to be great. But if it's kind of, you view a series as kind of a series, then sometimes all you see is this character as that person rather than that character.
Yep, exactly. So I guess like you're right. I mean, I was thinking too, like Sophie Turner and some of these other Maisie Williams and people who we didn't know before, but now, I mean, everyone would recognize them and know who they are, because that
absolutely
huge. I want this series to be as big. I want it to be that sort of, where people go in to work on Monday and they talk at the water cooler about what happened and what do you think's happening, what do you think is going to take place moving forward. Because, one of the things with Game of Thrones, not a lot of people went in. I mean, now that it's over, I think people are going back in and reading the books, which is cool. But with this series, I don't know that a lot of people will have read the series before they, although it's been around for a while, I don't know that they'll go into it and have the knowledge of what happens in the series. There's going to be tons of surprises and stuff. So that could be interesting. And that's also the thing, too, with a series. Now, Game of Thrones is being different because the series is not finished. This series is finished. You could go look up the spoilers and pick a character, and you could just research and figure out.
But that doesn't mean that they're going to go that way. And
no, I don't think they're. Yeah.
The other interesting thing with this is that because this is so large, you're going to have to skip a ton of content. I mean, it's just not feasible. So that changes the story. That changes the story, because you may have some things happen early, some things happen later, some things not happen at all. Maybe one character does something that was supposed to be another character in a book, or in the book it's a different character performing that task or whatever it is, and so that it changes it. It's not all going to go exactly the same.
Yeah. There are elements, too, in this series that I wonder, with the shift in culture in our society, if they might make some changes to some of the stuff. And I don't want to, go into all of it, but I think people who have read the series will maybe know what I'm talking about. There are elements to it that they might say, you know what, let's go a different route. And they actually have his wife, still on and available to kind of say, what do you think about this? And run some of these changes through her. I don't know, because, when you write stuff, times change, things change. I don't know, like they might just do it. And I'm not talking like major, plot changes or whatever, but just subtle little things or what have you. I think would be interesting. I'm also interested to see what's it going to be rated. I mean, is because you and I were talking before we started this that it seems to be written at a level that is sort of like almost young adult, but also maybe adult, kind of on the borderline there. Whereas Game of Thrones is a little bit more sophisticated.
Right.
I think just in writing style, people are going to get all what, but it's just a little bit more difficult to kind of follow.
Yes. Certainly in in comparing this to Game of Thrones, just because that's the other big fantasy book series that I've read recently. Certainly, just with this first book, it seems, and not like in a bad way. I'm not saying it's like a younger audience. It's just it's not nearly as thick. There's differences in the writing styles, but it certainly seems like I feel like somebody with a not. It's an easier read. I'll just say that.
Yeah, that's fine, because there are definitely elements of this that are not kids. It's not a kids book. It's not a kids series, I would say.
No, it's not. But yeah,
but it's also a little bit more straightforward. We even said maybe, and I'm speaking again to the whole. Well, I'll just speak to the first couple books here. In that the way it follows, the way it tracks. The way the plot kind of progresses, you stick with a main band of characters for a while, and you're not really bouncing all over different continents. Now, later on, some crazy stuff like that might take place, but at least in the beginning here, it seems a little bit more kind of straightforward. Like, we're not, jumping from the north down to King's Landing back over to Essos, which we do in the first book of A Game of Thrones. In this, we learn about new territory and new regions as our characters get there, and I think that's pretty cool. It helps you it kind of speeds up the world building and just acquiring. It makes better sense, I guess, of the land, the continent that we're in, and this world. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Oh gosh, okay. And we're gonna have to. I'm gonna have to remind myself not to be as long-winded on just every little frickin' detail here too as we go forward. But before we leave the Village Council, a couple things we wanted to mention here. First of all, huge shout out to just some of our patrons. We got a handful of patrons already, and I'm actually super shocked by that.
When you said that, I was like, what?
Yeah. So we love you guys. I mean,
absolutely.
So that's huge. I couldn't believe that. It's awesome. We do post over on our Patreon page. It's not just a place where you can come and get like the exclusive stuff. There is free stuff there. We always have a poll for after each episode, and we have a discussion thread. So we've got and it's just early on, so we don't really have a whole lot on those, but we will. We're hoping, anyways. It's a place where if you want to comment, right on the show, and that's a place where you can go sign up in there and for free. Go in there, leave us a big comment about what you thought on the first 9 chapters. Even the prologue, even as we kind of progress, if you pick up later and we're in book 2 already, I mean, we get updates, we get notifications when people post on those threads, and so that's kind of cool. We can go back and look and say like, oh wow, somebody's making a connection they're making a connection to something that we are talking about right now. It might be later in the series, so just kind of a cool little element you guys can look into. And there's also exclusive merch over there, okay? And there's also some cool stuff with an artist who we came across who is a pretty big deal in the Wheel of Time community, and some major surprises coming down the line there. So be sure to check that out. There's tons of cool stuff there, and we have our extended edition series, which we record right after the main show, and then we also have sort of our Wheel of Time history series that we're doing, and maybe a spoiler series. Who knows? There'll be tons of stuff over there.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see. Oh man, dude. All right, I get so worked up during these episodes. So what do we got here? So are we ready? Are we ready to
I think
dive
we
in?
are, man. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here we go. We're hopping into the read, the main portion of the show here, and it's kind of neat. I actually like how we've designed this because it's different than what we've done in our other projects, and it also it's different because Sir Matt, this is this is your first read, and so we're trying to figure out like what really are you being drawn to, and that's what I loved about this, is that you were being drawn to certain quotes and different passages that you were like, dude, this is important. I don't know what it really may mean, but it seems important to me, and I think that's what a lot of first readers will catch. So we'll dive in here too. So we've got this divided up into almost like 3 segments, and it might be 2, could be 3, could be 4, depending on
it just depends on the reading. Yeah. So initially, so last time we did the prologue, right? So that's where Luce Theron realizes he's killed his family.
Yeah.
Then he draws on the power. He raises dragon mount, and kind of teleports himself away. So this time we are doing chapters 1 through chapters 9. So we're going to read a very brief description of each of the chapters, just so we can kind of broadly do a summary. So chapter 1, Rand and Tam Althor transport apple brandy to Edmund's Field for Beltane. A suspicious stranger watches Rand. In the village, they learn of other strangers. Chapter 2, Mat and Rand meet Moraine and Lan. Chapter 3, Fain tells of a false dragon in Gai'don. Egwene tells Rand she wants to be a wisdom. Chapter 4, Tom demonstrates some skill, and Tam and Rand return home. Chapter 5, I think this is like where it really picks up here, and where we're going to be focusing quite a bit of our discussion today. Trollocs attack Tam and Rand's home. Chapter 6, Rand takes a feverish Tam through the woods and learns that he was found on a mountain after the Aiel War.
Yep.
Chapter 7, it is discovered that Moraine is an Aes Sedai who helped defend the town. Chapter 8, Moraine heals Tom and tells Rand that he, Mat, and Perrin were the target of the attack and must leave the village. Chapter 9, Moraine tells the villagers about Manetheren. Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, sorry. So what we're going to do today is we have essentially 3 kind of big talking points, 3 segments we're going to be kind of discussing. So part 1 is going to be our main cast, like who are the characters we meet, a little bit about each and every one of them that we learn about in these chapters, and we're going to be discussing kind of broadly all of the chapters. Then chapter 2, which I would say is the meat and potatoes of this episode, something special about Rand. I have quite a bit of quotes pulled up from the chapters, and I have the pages that they're on as well. And then part 3, we're going to discuss a little bit about the dream world, the dark one, and the dragon. And this is going to be, I would say it's kind of heavily focused, if you will, really on chapter 9. That's where Rand's dream, and then a little bit about Trollocs, Fades, and the dragon. And then we will also do it's really kind of a part 4 to this, which is that kind of more in-depth about something, and we'll do this every episode, and that's going to be over on our Patreon, just another kind of like deeper dive if there's like something specific that people kind of want. Should we jump into part 1 here?
Yeah, so dude, I was kind of laughing there just because I'm sitting back here thinking, like, listening to Sir Matt just talk about all this stuff, and the fact that we're here. I mean, we've been making, I don't know, like you said this before. Your brothers, our friends. I mean, we've known, like, Wheel of Time has been in my life for a long time. I love just that I was recommended to me, and I went on this epic adventure and journey. And so I just get kind of giddy over here because these are like my friends. This is the main cast. Mm-hmm. You know, these are people who I know, and like it's funny because they're relatable characters. For example, so we have Rand, Perrin, and Mat, are our main 3, guys that we kind of follow. Our main women here, we have Egwene, Nynaeve, Moraine, Lan, and Tom. We even threw in here, Tam Althor, because we got to talk about him now because, just because.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like, the cast will grow. And there will be other characters as they kind of split. They will gather people around them, which is interesting and pretty awesome. But these are our main characters, and they feel like friends. Like, I literally know, I have a buddy who I could say, is a little bit like Perrin, and I have a buddy, who I'm speaking with, who is a little bit like Mat, and it's just kind of funny. It's kind of funny how that works out, and you kind of know who these individuals are. And so to start this all off, I mean, in chapter 1, we read sort of in our teaser episode just this awesome first paragraph where the wheel of time turns and the ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. What I really wanted to focus on here is, and people will know this you at the beginning of a couple different books, if not most of them. I have to go check. There's always a reference to wind. And, you read from the prophecies, at the end of our prologue episode that we want the dragon to ride again on the winds of time. Okay. And it's interesting in this first little bit that the wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but it was a beginning. So it actually describes the wind there for a little bit. And it talks about how it eventually leads right into gusting that plastered Rand al'Thor's cloak, that plastered it to his back, and it whipped the earth-colored wool around his legs. So it describes this wind, and I just want to point that out for some of the people who have read the series before, because you'll know that's important. It's sort of a motif or a theme that Robert Jordan kind of weaves into his writing. The wind is almost a character, So
yeah. I actually, if it was okay, I kind of wanted to read just some of that passage, and we're going to have a few kind of lengthy passages here. The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gives it birth comes again. In one age, called the third age by some, an age yet to come, and an age long past, the wind rose in the mountains of mist. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but it was a beginning. Born below the ever-cloud-capped peaks that gave the mountains their name, the wind blew east, out across the sand hills, once the shore of a great ocean, before the breaking of the world. Down it flailed into the two rivers, into the tangled forest called the Westwood, and beat it two men walking with their cart and horse down the rock-strewn track called the Quarry Road. For all that spring should have come a good month since, the wind carried an icy chill as if it would rather bear snow. Gusts plastered Rand al'Thor's cloak to his back, whipped the earth-colored wool around his legs, then it streamed out behind him. He wished his coat were heavier, or that he had worn an extra shirt. Half the time when he tried to tug the cloak back around him, it caught on the quiver swinging at his hips. Trying to hold the cloak one-handed did not do much good anyway. He had his bow in the other, an arrow nocked and ready to draw. As a particularly strong blast tugged the cloak out of his hand, he glanced at his father over the back of the shaggy brown mare. He felt a little foolish about wanting to reassure himself that Tam was still there, but it was that kind of a day. The wind howled when it rose, but aside from that, quiet lay heavy on the land. The soft creak of the axe sounded loud by comparison. No birds sang in the forest. No squirrels chittered from a branch. Not that he expected them. Really not this spring.
Yeah.
And, there's a soft wind rumbling, but other than that, everything seems pretty normal.
Yep.
But that is anything but the case. And that's what I really love about this first chapter here is when they kind of notice a rider. And so, I mean, that's what happens in stories, right? You take what would be an ordinary day, and then something happens in it that is anything but ordinary.
Yeah.
And that is how great stories begin. Is something out of the ordinary happens, a catalyst, if you will, that causes a character to shift into something special, right? I mean, plenty of other stories. Star Wars. Luke Skywalker has his average day working in the fields, and then one day he finds these two droids with a secret message, and then his family is killed, sending him off on this great journey.
Yeah.
I mean, Harry Potter, right? He one day suddenly gets a letter, and then more and more and more and more letters, and so his life changes. And so I think it's just great here that very similarly we have Rand al'Thor, who everything seems to be normal, and then all of a sudden they notice something extremely out of the ordinary, a black rider, and that changes his fate forever.
Yeah. Here's something that I have to... Because and you know this, Sir Matt, I love Lord of the Rings, and I know you do too, and we've read it. We love the movies. You're making parallels to Star Wars. That's a great one. Luke just kind of like up and here we go. Harry Potter. I mean, Lord of the Rings. Robert Jordan loved, and he grew up on Lord of the Rings, and you can see it right here already. A black rider, a dark rider. I mean, geez, holy cow, that's exactly what Frodo and everybody's dealing with. Like a black rider shows up. Really, to start it off, and you already know this, Moraine is here in, we're going to get to this in a second, she's in the Two Rivers. Well, Gandalf shows up in the frickin' Shire. So you have a wizard-like character
in both Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. The Hobbit,
yes.
I mean, Bilbo Baggins lives a very normal life until one day Gandalf and all these dwarves show up.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, imagine that. I mean, I think that's great. And the crazy thing is you can say, well, this has been done before. But it's done in the way he does it, it's new. It's also new. And he has his own twist and spin on this. And I think he's just paying such tribute to one of his favorite fantasy series. And he just takes it in such a, I don't know. There's so many cool little nods to other, to that series. But at the same time, this is his own world. Some of the stuff he comes up with is
I mean,
crazy.
that's how stories and theater work. Is you take an ordinary day and then something happens out of the ordinary. You don't tell people stories about ordinary days because no one cares. It's everybody's journey begins because something out of the ordinary happens.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and here's something too. Just so many different things. So. The wind is moving, right, and you can kind of hear it howling and stuff, but there's no bird singing. There's a silence that he says sort of the movement or the sound of the axle, it sounded loud by comparison. Maybe typically it would not going down the quarry road, but it does sound loud now. It's just strange, even though there's this loud wind, but there's nothing else, and it's just them and the creaking of their cart as they go down the road, and then he starts to kind of look around. You get that feeling like you're being watched, like you're being followed. And that's what he gets here. And he starts to almost feel kind of like ashamed, like, well, maybe it was nothing. Maybe I'm just, you're with your dad. You're trying to be, I don't know. These kids are growing up too. So this is a time where they've grown up. They're supposed to be. He wants to emulate and be more like his father, and his father doesn't seem concerned by it. So why is he concerned? Is he just jumping at shadows, or is there really something in the shadow here?
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So I'm glad. Okay. So I'm glad we got that opening part here because it's the setup to our story. So, again, since we're covering such a large topic, we can't go chapter. We just unfortunately don't have the time to go chapter by chapter. So I think we'll kind of go down kind of the main cast here, and we've already provided the summary of the chapters we're reading. Yeah. So we'll start with Rand, but I think Rand we can kind of breeze through just a little bit since we're going to spend the second biggest portion of this show talking about Rand and what makes him special, or certainly what alludes to him being special or something about him. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of these other characters here as we kind of set up our world here. So,
well, I just want to mention too, like, so the interesting thing, we start off, we are introduced in the prologue, first of all, to Lews Therin, and that's pretty cool. We're like, what is that? How does that fit in? But when you get to the main series here, and you're now in present time, air quote, the first character we are introduced to is Rand al'Thor. He is our main character. Yes. These other characters are also main characters, though, but he's just introduced to first, and so as you kind of prioritize, or you sort of see, who we're supposed to focus in on, we have Rand, and then he will meet Mat. So we're just going to bounce right off of Rand because Rand is already. We'll talk about his description later on and his physical characteristics, as well as, like, I mean, golly, like Robert Jordan talks about their accents, and like their accent sort of, it sounded like a Two Rivers man. He sounded like he's from the Two Rivers, but he doesn't look like it. So that's something you need to kind of know about Rand al'Thor, and we'll get to that later. But yeah, so Mat from Cawthon is his good friend, who when they get to Emmon, when they're in Emond's Field and they're there near the Wine Spring End, he runs into Mat, and they're getting ready for Beltane. We might as well say that, they're getting ready for this big festival that they typically have. They're all excited, right? But Mat he's a mischievous character. He
is. You can tell right from the get-go that Mat from Cawthon is he's going to be a troublemaker.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're talking about, some pranks that they've been pulling and stuff like that, and stealing, perhaps stealing some pie and stuff and stuff like that. So you can just tell as we go forward throughout these stories that Matt is because Matt, Rand, and Perrin are all really good friends, as well as Egwene there as well. But certainly Matt, Perrin, and Rand are all good buddies, and they're all kind of. They're all young boys, but certainly Matt, I would say, is the most kind of troublemaking out of the bunch.
Yeah, right. And so here I get a little just something here from the first chapter. A quick tug at Rand's sleeve and a voice pitched low for his ear alone distracted him from the older men's talk. Come on, Rand, while they're arguing before they put you to work. So they're actually, Tam is being approached by the village council members, and really he's supposed to be taking that apple brandy inside to the Wine Spring Inn for the mayor, and Matt doesn't want, get out of here before he makes you, let's go play, let's go hang out, let's go talk. I mean, before you have to kind of do some work or whatever. He's trying to get Rand out of doing something, and it's like Rand knows he's got to stay. His dad wants him to put that to help. He's got to help his dad, and so Matt's the guy who's pulling you away from the task that you're supposed to be kind of completing, and he's like, let's go on this cool side quest. It's like, well, I got a job here. I'm supposed to be doing, this or whatever. It's just that's who he is, right?
Mm-hmm. And then to kind of counteract that, you have Perrin, right?
Yep.
And Perrin's kind of he's a kind of a bigger, stockier kind of guy, and he, I would say, is almost like the opposite of Matt, and he seems a little more kind of not like nervous. He's not really like the nervous type, but he's certainly a little more reserved. He's not not nearly the troublemaker that Matt is. Yeah,
for sure. And here's just a quick description on him. So he actually shows up. Let's see. Rand and Matt edged into the crowd, getting as close as they could. So this is when the peddler kind of shows up. Rand would have stopped halfway, but Matt wriggled through the press, pulling Rand behind him until they were right behind the council. So you can see Rand would have stopped, back where like a decent spot, but Matt's like, "Nah, we got to push on. Come on, buddy, let's go.
Right.
We're getting to the front of this." And then here we get Perrin stepping in. So I had been thinking you were going to stay out on the farm through the whole festival, Perrin Abara shouted at Rand over the clamor. Half a head shorter than Rand, the curly-haired blacksmith's appearance was so stocky as to seem a man and a half wide, with arms and shoulders thick enough to rival those of Master Luhan himself. He could easily have pushed through the throng, but that was not his way. So right there, a little bit of like he could have easily muscled his way through, but that's not who he is. He picked his path carefully, offering apologies to people who had only half a mind to notice anything but the peddler. He made the apologies anyway, and tried not to jostle anyone as he worked through the crowd to Rand and Matt. Imagine it, he said when he finally reached them. Bell time and a peddler, both together. I bet there really are fireworks. So he's just a good-hearted, guy, and he's I can see him, can't you see him kind of tip? He's a big dude, super muscular, but he's like so worried about bumping into people. Like, oh, excuse me, he's like, let me get through here real quick. I'm just trying to get to my friends. Whereas Matt was just bulldozing his way into this crowd. Like, come on, let's go, Rand, let's go.
Well, and just doing a little bit, not super far ahead, but just a little bit of research of Perrin. It seems like he does it because he's just a more cautious guy, right? He's just a little more cautious because he knows he's so big, and so I think because of that, some people will view him as kind of clumsy, right, or like kind of dim-witted, because he's a little more reserved.
Well, and oftentimes he is slow to speak, and I actually really like that about him. He just because you're the first person to speak up, somebody asks for a suggestion or they need hey, what should we do here? Just because you're the first person to say something doesn't mean you're the wisest or you're the smartest or that it's even the best plan. And I thought it's genius that he has a character like this who's like, you know what? He's not slow. He's just thorough. He likes to sit and think and wait and really have a good plan moving forward. Whereas you see some individuals in the series who are rash and who move forward quickly, it doesn't always end well for them. Although there is a time for that, and that's sort of where you have Rand being the balance between, Matt and Perrin.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, next we have Egwene Alvear, and I really like Egwene. I gotta say, to me, she's actually the character who I think I'm kind of drawn to. Actually, as one, I think she's really like the so far. I think not my favorite. I mean, because I just like Rand because he's the main character, so it's gonna be hard. And I think going forward, I will really start to come to like Matt. Just because we share the same name, so that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Egwene, I think the thing about her is, she is certainly the most, I would say, ambitious character, in that she really wants to become a wisdom. She really, really wants to kind of become something bigger and better for herself, which I think is really, really interesting and really cool.
Yeah, it just cracks me up to hear you. It just like knowing, and I hope other people are getting this too. Like, I really want you to be honest too about these characters, because it's so crazy. After 13 books, or so, it's crazy where we end up with these characters, and I cannot help but to think about that, because I know some of what will happen between all of these characters, and it's like, dang, I cannot wait to see if that sticks.
Exactly. Well, it's certainly up for a change. I mean, I'm only 17 chapters in, so
yeah. But I just mean, like, it's fascinating to me to even think about that, because I didn't expect you to say that about Egwene, And the reason I think that is because I know more about her, but I also, there's other characters who I don't know. I'm interested to see what you think about Egwene and Nynaeve, because they're similar. In that, you said she's aspiring to be a wisdom, and Nynaeve Almera is our wisdom right now. She's very young, very young wisdom.
Yeah, but I mean, unfortunately, I don't think I don't have enough on her yet, because only being 17 chapters in, only to know other than Nynaeve is just a very young wisdom, and that seems to be somewhat of an issue. Because some people take issue with it, that the fact that she is so young, and some people don't like that. But again, I think that's what I like about Egwene, is that she can look to Nynaeve and say, well, look, she's a wisdom, I could be a wisdom. Why couldn't I start my training to become a wisdom right now? And she does.
Yeah. Right.
We see that. It's actually I think it's really cool. Because there's clearly this sort of, I don't know if it's necessarily romantic or just the fact that they're all young, and Rand certainly is attracted to Egwene. I mean, he kind of loses speed. They say, like, Matt and those guys say, well, you're just gonna go stare at Egwene again, and this guy, and there's certainly something there. Whether that fleshes out or not, I mean, we'll see, but certainly there's something there. But I really like when, after the Trollocs attack, and Rand, that's who he sees first. Is he runs into Egwene when Egwene and Nynaeve are tending to people. And it says, he looks at her, and her face is covered in soot, but her hands are perfectly clean, as if he doesn't kind of realize what's going on. And it's because she's there helping all of these people. And so, like, immediately, I mean, like, there, Nynaeve is, hey, we got work to do. And Egwene, if you want to be part of it, you can't sit around talking to Rand all day. You got to get in here and help. And so I just think that, I don't know, I just thought it was really cool.
No, it is. It is. And it's almost like, it's all of them they have that sort of glint in their eye where they talk about far different regions and places that they've only gone this far, and they wonder what it's like outside, and then you also have the little bit of a romance sort of thing going on, and there's such they're happy, they're optimistic, they're in love with life, and they just want to. This is a good time for them, even though that it's winter and things are bad right now. Like, Beltane is a big party. They've got maybe fireworks. They've got a gleeman showing up, and they even have other visitors in the town. They have a peddler. The peddler shows up here and gives them information. So it's just this small village of people, and it's very attractive to kind of see them looking out at the world and saying, God, there's so much out there, and just I can't wait to get there and see all of that. So I'm with you. I mean, actually, I really do like Egwene as well. I mean, I think she's awesome. I love Nynaeve. I mean, I absolutely love Nynaeve, and that people will know maybe why. She's awesome. I actually really, there's not a character up here that we're going to talk about that I don't really like in some way.
Right.
Which is awesome, and they all have such extremely different paths, and come from different backgrounds and everything, and just have different things to contribute to this journey. So that's pretty much Egwene and Nynaeve, them being the wisdom and sort of that would be like the head of the women's circle. Also, I mean, they're kind of associated with the women's circle. They Nynaeve is the wisdom, and she's from another village, very young, but they almost, Senbui and some of those other guys almost think she can control the weather and that she should be able to, and sort of like why is the weather so bad? They just don't. I don't know. They butt heads with Nynaeve quite a bit. The wisdom. So.
Right. And so that brings us to, and I think it's kind of interesting to do it in this way because it almost feels like some sort of a power structure, right? You have Egwene who wants to become more, Nynaeve who is a wisdom, and then you have Moiraine who is an Aes Sedai, right? I mean, so she's like almost like the tippy top of like women's power. And I just think it's interesting that we get introduced to all three of these characters in this very short segment that we're reading here, because that is one of the biggest deals, at least so far that I can see in this series, is there is a difference between, like, it's not just like when you read a lot of medieval stuff, just because they, like in Game of Thrones, the women are put down and not at all in power whatsoever. But in this book series, it's like the women are almost in charge.
Yes. Absolutely.
I mean, they like you have the village council and then the women's circle, and it's like almost like, well, it's above it. And then you have the Aes Sedai, who seem like they're like the real deal. They're the people who are really in control. I mean, saying, well, this is kind of how it's going to be. And certainly Moiraine is like the next level above Nynaeve, right? Nynaeve clearly knows, I don't want to say magic, but she certainly understands, like, we view as science, right? Like, make sure you wash your hands when you're cleaning these people.
Oh yeah,
and stuff like that. But then Moraine's like at like a far beyond level. There's clearly some sort of magic and knowledge of other more ancient, powerful things there.
Yeah, for sure. So when we're introduced to her, I mean, we don't know really
much about
first,
her. Yeah,
who she is. We know that she's a stranger in Emond's Field. And then they talk about how Lady Moiraine actually had gone up to the wisdom and had called her child, and how that had like really ticked off Nynaeve, but she meant nothing by it,
Yeah, but they're like similar ages, I think, aren't they? Or like at least she looks like she's similar age.
Yeah, they look like they're similar age. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they. I mean, they like Nynaeve is, Nynaeve is a little bit older than Rand and. Perrin, Matt, and Egwene. Those four are about the same age. And then Nynaeve is
so they're probably older. I mean, yeah, Rand and those guys are like, they seem, I don't know if it actually says.
Let me look, because it might actually say how old they are. I think they might be around 18 or 16 or 18.
Yeah, certainly they clearly feel like teenagers, where Nynaeve and Moiraine feel like they're in either their like 20s or like very, very early 30s.
Yeah, and I think Nynaeve, is someone who. Okay, so here we go. Let's see, putting him at about. Oh, they say like either 19 or 20.
Okay.
I'm just going off of some website here. This is not even the Wheel of Time fandom. Let me check that real quick too. So that's what I was thinking, like anywhere between 18 and 20, and I think Nynaeve, you could say, was in her 20s, and then Moiraine looks like she's in her 30s or something. Although, Moraine's just interesting. She's just an interesting character.
She shows up. She gives them the coins, and then, she's got. She clearly has some very strong questions for Rand and Matt and Perrin after the Trollocs attack, right? And she starts talking about a lot of these. That's when they start talking about like the dragon and some of these prophecies and stuff like that. And so clearly, I mean, she has knowledge of all of that stuff, being an Aes Sedai.
Right. Yeah. Oh, they've got it mapped. Dude, people on Reddit are unbelievable, man. They've got the the timeline, because the actual the timeline and the calendar system in this is a little bit, and this is something we're going to be covering in our Wheel of Time history series, is a little bit kind of crazy. Depending on who won the wars in the past and whoever was in power, some people were trying to create new calendars and all this kind of stuff. But they do have it kind of listed here that he was probably around 19 or 20. Egwene might be 18, and Nynaeve maybe about 25.
Okay.
Yeah, they're even saying Egwene might be maybe even 17. But they've got it kind of mapped out here. I'll share this with you later. But yeah. So there you go. You kind of get an idea for age, and in Nynaeve being that young, Senbui and some of these older guys might look at her and even think she looked younger. Maybe, I don't know, because they really think she's way too young to be a wisdom. Someone who is in charge. And I think the last wisdom. Also sometimes just because of circumstances, maybe she was meant to be mentoring under another wisdom a little bit longer, and then because of circumstances, she ends up taking over. At an earlier age than she anticipated. So,
yeah. Okay. All right. Next character we have is Lan. Lan is with Moraine.
Yep.
It's you have an Aes Sedai and their warder, and that's where that gets into this whole power structure of the Aes Sedai, right? So here it's like the warder is kind of like her. I don't want to use the word assistant or I don't know what the correct term is.
Yeah, kind of almost. Let me think how to describe a warder. Really, they do assist her in a lot of ways. I mean, he assists her, and he's also he protects her. We'll get into powers
companion.
And abilities.
Certainly, it's like her companion. Yeah.
Yeah. But he's pretty awesome. There's a ton of mystery kind of surrounding him when you start this, right? I mean,
we really don't know much about him so far.
Yeah, and really, one of the boys that was there in the Two Rivers actually kind of he when he first is talking about Lady Moraine says that he thinks I think that land guy's a warder, and they're like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, he could be, he he looks like it because he has sort of the cloak, and he's heard legend that they've heard of Aes Sedai and they've heard of warders, but they've never really met one. So they don't know what this would be like. They barely. I mean, the idea that a gleeman would come to their town is also just fascinating, and fireworks would be fascinating. They're mesmerized by the peddler. So it's like Lan is almost just he's over the top, and he's super kind of mysterious, but he's a straight up badass. I mean, he is something else, and you get that because you just get that vibe from him as he's just his presence, the way they describe him. I mean, he's just a cool dude, and he's got a sword. He's got the little band wrapped around his head there. He just, So,
okay, so then that brings us to we have two more characters we're going to kind of bring up here. Tom Maryland.
Tom Maryland,
he's a gleeman. Okay, the gleemen are who I'm just most drawn to because I just think it's cool.
Yeah.
These kind of traveling bards, they have stories, they kind of tricks. I just think it's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, he dedicates the whole chapter 4 to it's titled The Gleeman, and it's
Gleeman.
It's really cool. And actually, when they first meet him, he's kind of coming down. He's staying there at the Wine Spring Inn, and he comes down, and he almost kind of interrupts the. He wanders by the village council, and they almost don't want him in their business, but they're also happy that he's there because he's going to provide them with great entertainment later on. Let's see. Yeah, right here, actually, I'll read a little bit of this. So the men were, the village council, Rand went on. I'm sure they intended no discourtesy. You see, we just learned there's a war in Gai'don, and a man claiming to be the Dragon Reborn, a false dragon. Aes Sedai are riding there from Tar Valon. The council is trying to decide if we might be in danger here. Old news, even in Baerlon, the Gleeman had said dismissively. So he's kind of just, I think, a little mystified by these people. Like, this is old news, but it's brand new news to folks in the Two Rivers here in Emond's Field. So, he's he's got his Gleeman's cloak. He has a flute, a harp. He tells tales. He sings songs. He can juggle. He does knife tricks. I mean, he's He's pretty awesome. So
yeah. Okay, and then that brings us to our last character we're going to kind of spotlight here, Tam Althor, Rand's father. Wow. Okay, so Tam seems pretty straightforward on, just kind of a farm. You think of like a farmer, kind of a father, just kind of this kind of rough around the edges.
Yeah.
Bigger, stronger kind of guy. He's out with Rand there at the beginning when they're on the road, and he it's like he doesn't necessarily not believe Rand, but he certainly doesn't see the man with the black cloak. And then everything just kind of happens really fast. They lock up their house, right? Because he starts to believe Rand more, that he saw this man in this black cloak, and then the next thing you know, Trollocs attack, and Tam gets hurt, and he starts to be in a fever dream, and he starts saying all kinds of stuff, which we're about to get into, and we get to move over to our second segment here, and then he's being kind of taken care of by Egwene and Nynaeve there. They get him over to him, and then it seems like they don't have a way to heal him, and so then Rand and these guys all have to leave. So that's kind of where we leave Tam.
Right, and that's really what we're kind of covering in this first, 1 through 9, and it's fitting that we ended with Tam Althor, because that's kind of where we're stopping for this episode. But I want to back up though and just talk about his presence. When he shows up, the mayor, the village council, everyone really wants his opinion, and they look to him. Right,
they respect him. There's a lot of respect for him.
A lot of respect. He's a guy who is just, I don't know, he's quiet, he's reserved, but also when he speaks, everyone listens. And this is going to be such a weird, odd connection, but anybody who has read the story, it's John Steinbeck, his Of Mice and Men, I read it every year with my 9th grade class, and we go over it. And so I think of a character on that ranch. His name is Slim, and he is a character who, one of the lines about him is that that Slim heard more than what was said. And I always feel like Tam Althor is that type of guy. He hears more than what you actually say, because he's reading your body language. He knows. He's just very intuitive, kind of almost like an all-knowing type of guy, and he feels that way because we learn he's one of the few people who have been out of the two rivers and who's gone out into the world and came back. And so there's just as much mystery surrounding him at the start of this, and he's one of those characters who we haven't got to it in this part. We do. Matt does know we read through chapter 17, so we know that we actually ultimately leave Tam in the two rivers. So it's like, whoa, there's such a mystery, like just a gold mine of stuff in his mind, or that he could tell us that we don't get yet, and we're going to have to be patient. So yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, hey, let's move on over to part 2 here, since that's right where we're at. So something special about Rand is what I have. This is going to be kind of the meat and potatoes here of our discussion today, because, man, just from the get-go, you start finding out there's definitely some stuff going on surrounding Rand, and how he seems a little bit different. It seems like almost the Trollocs were after him specifically. There's certainly some stuff that Tam says during his fever dream that we need to cover here. So I have a handful of highlighted sections here, and this is coming from Kindle, so I'm certainly going to have the chapter. I'm going to say the page. I can't attest to whether or not it is going to be the same page in the version of the book that you're reading. But he was hoping his father had not noticed. He was afraid when Tam said, "Remember the flame, lad, and the void." It was an odd thing Tam had taught him. Concentrate on a single flame and feed all your passion into it. Fear, hate, anger, until your mind became empty. Became one with the void, Tam said, and you could do anything. Nobody else in Edmondsfield talked that way, but Tam won the archery competition at Beltane every year with his flame and his void. Rand thought he might have a chance placing this year himself if he could manage to hold on to the void. For Tam to bring it up now meant that he had noticed, but he had said nothing more about it. That's from page 25, chapter 1. So immediately, even in the first chapter, we see that Tam kind of isn't just saying concentrate. He's saying concentrate the flame, the void. Some things that it almost seems like are not things that anybody in Edmund's Field would otherwise would say.
Right. Yeah. They wouldn't. They don't speak that way. They don't talk that way. But it sets him apart. I mean, Tam's not going around teaching other people this. He's just teaching this to his son, and so his son sort of knows. I don't hear anybody else talking like this to his other friends, to Matt or to Perrin or to any of the other boys there in Edmund's Field. So, yeah, I mean, definitely something special.
And it's definitely not just Rand. It's also Tam. We learned there's definitely some stuff going on with Tam. I mean, he's clearly left Edmund's Field at some point and done some traveling.
Yeah.
And I think that's something super important to take back. So now I'm going to shift gears here almost to chapter 5. So this is when the Trollocs attack. Yeah. This is going to be kind of where a lot of the rest of this discussion comes in. So this is from page 80. When Tam came back, Rand started in surprise. Stared in surprise. A thick belt slanted around Tam's waist, and from the belt hung a sword with a bronze horn on the black scabbard, and another on the long hilt. The only men Rand had ever seen wearing swords were the merchant's guards, and Lan, of course. That his father might own one had never even occurred to him, except for the herons on the sword look a good deal like Lan's sword. Where did that come from? He asks. Did you get it from a peddler? Like how much did it cost? Slowly, Tam drew the weapon. Firelight played along the gleaming length. It was nothing at all like the plain, rough blades Rand had seen in the hands of merchants' guards. No gems or gold adorned it, but it seemed grand to him. Nonetheless, the blade, very slightly curved and sharp on only one edge, bore another heron etched into the steel. Short quillions worked to look like braid flanked the hilt. It seemed almost fragile compared with the swords of the merchant's guards. Most of those were double-edged and thick enough to chop down a tree. I got it a long time ago, Tam said, a long way from here, and I paid entirely too much. 2 coppers is too much for one of these. Your mother didn't approve, but she always wiser than I. I was young then, and it seemed worth the price at the time. She always wanted me to get rid of it, and more than once I've thought she was right, that I should just give it away. So, I mean, right there we see, okay, well, clearly he got this somewhere long away from Edmund's Field.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating little thing that he doesn't see other people wearing it. It's a sword that's different than the merchants. It's marked by herons, so there's actually two heron marks on it. And it's super sharp. It's also, it looks like one of the things I think he says, and he kind of mentions, or he'll definitely mention it later, is that it looks like it's freaking in pristine condition. It's surprising that it's this awesome. And yeah, he paid too much. And here's something is that really what he's saying there is 2 coppers is too much for one of these. Your mother didn't approve. She was always wiser than I. It's almost like because 2 coppers is like not much. So this sword clearly is worth a lot more, but it's the idea that it's what the sword brings you or why you would have, or the need to have a sword. It's not worth it. You know what I mean? It's like it brings so much another aspect or element into your life of violence and danger and what have you. So it's not even worth having that. It'd be better if we didn't have to have it. Exactly. And there is an element. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like the sword is, and there's really nothing special about it other than it's just a nice sword. I don't think there's any sort of magical qualities to it or anything like that, but I think it's more the fact that he got it from someplace far away. That's the important thing to take away from it.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I just where I'm at. So that's
No. Yeah. I mean, it is the idea that he's traveled. Like what it's showing you is that Tam has been outside of the 2 rivers, and there's more to this man. Yeah.
Exactly, because immediately following that, page 81, why would Tam have bought a sword? He could not he could not even imagine. And where had Tam come by it? How far away? No one ever left Two Rivers, or very few at least. He had always vaguely supposed his father must have gone outside. His mother had been an outlander, but a sword. He had a lot of questions to ask once they had settled at the table. Well, unfortunately, he doesn't get to ask any of those questions because pretty much immediately following that is when the Trollocs start to attack.
Yeah.
And then Rand actually gets hold of the sword. And so he says, the wolf smile became a snarl and the Trolloc lunged for him. Rand had not thought anything that big could move so fast. Desperately, he brought his sword up. The monstrous body crashed into him, slamming him against the wall. Breath left his lungs in one gasp. He fought for air as they fell to the floor together, the Trolloc on top. Frantically, he struggled beneath the crushing weight, trying to avoid thick hands groping for him and snapping jaws. Abruptly, the Trolloc spasmed and was still. Battered and bruised, half suffocated by the bulk on top of him, for a moment Rand could only lie there in disbelief. Quickly, he came to his senses, though enough to writhe out from under the body at least. And body it was. The bloodied blade of Tam's sword stood out from the center of the Trolloc's back. He had gotten it up in time, after all. Blood covered Rand's hands as well, and made a blackish smear across the front of his shirt. His stomach churned, and he swallowed hard to keep from being sick. He shook as hard as he had in the worst of his fear, but in this time the relief of still being alive. Well, it's a good thing he had that sword.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, and the crazy right before that too is Tam is in there using it, and he's Rand goes on the run, and then he ends up rendezvousing with his father later on, and he needs to get back into the house to get some supply and stuff. And yeah, I mean it's a great thing he had it. He gets it up just in time, and that's his first kill, really his first time that he's taken. Like besides like just hunting and stuff. This is a violent sort of fight combat that he had here with this Trolloc, and these things are just the descriptions of the Trollocs too are just they're hideous. They are just some your worst nightmare type of thing. They're huge too. I mean, I think people think like, well, the Trollocs aren't that big of a deal. No, they're huge. They're a big deal. So
yeah, absolutely. And so this is, I mean, and then I want to just bring up right here the next thing I have highlighted here. So this is in chapter 6, so just a couple pages after. He's angry with himself. This was no time or place for foolish fancies. It was only a big knife. How many times had he dreamed about wearing a sword and having adventures? If he could kill one Trolloc with it, he could surely fight off others as well. Only he knew all too well that what had happened in the farmhouse had been the purest luck, and his daydream adventures had never included his teeth chattering or running for his life through the night or his father at the point of death. So, I mean, I just think it's crazy that we go from in the span of one chapter, your dad pulling out this sword that he got from someplace really far away, to his father being attacked and now in some sort of fever dream, and not doing so well, and you've killed a Trolloc, which is something out of your imagination and daydreams and fantasies, and you thinking, well, it was just luck that I killed him. So, I mean, it's just crazy to see all of these coincidences happening right at once.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think one of the things we need to look at there too is the way you have it in your mind, and you think of these adventures. Oh, it'd be so fun, it'd be so cool to just be, out on horseback, taking on the world with your sword and stuff. And really, it's not the way it is. And he even says, it was by the purest luck that he was able to get his sword up in time, and he knows that, he acknowledges, he realizes that, like, wow, I couldn't actually fight one of these guys off. I just got lucky there. This is crazy. What am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. So it's good because you don't want your main character to have sort of that false sense of sort of I can do anything and I'm just going to charge in there and stuff. That's not real, and it's hard to kind of connect to with a character like that. I mean, I would be teeth chattering, shaking in my boots, like pissing my britches out there in the woods, wondering what in the world is Trollocs running around like. Oh my God, dude! It's crazy because like reading the series now, There's been a few times where I've on Twitter I've tweeted out like just got out of my car and swear to God I saw like a fade or a Trolloc over in the dark. I'm like what is over there by like I have a big barn over my yard. I'm always just like what was that? Something just bounced around the corner there. It's like no, it's nothing. It's never been there before. But I'm thinking about this series and it's yeah. So anyways, that is a cool connection there, and there is again. This is all kind of pointing towards there's something special about Rand.
About Rand, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is by far the biggest kind of takeaway here. There's something clearly something is not adding up with Rand. This is from chapter 6. This is when Tam is speaking from his fever dream. After time, Tam spoke up again. Avendasora. Avensora. It said it makes no seed, but they brought a cutting to Kyrian. Yeah, some of these names I will need just a little bit of help on here.
Yeah.
A sapling, a royal gift of wonder for the king. Though he sounded angry, he was barely loud enough for Rand to understand. Anyone who could hear him would be able to hear the little scraping across the ground too. Rand kept on, only half listening. They never make peace, never, but they brought a sapling as a sign of peace. 500 years it grew, 500 years of peace with those who make no peace with strangers. Why did he cut it down? Why? Blood was the price for Avendasora. No, is it? I don't think it's Avendasora. I think Avendalirdra. I don't know. Blood for the price of layman's pride. He faded off into muttering once more. Tiredly, Rand wondered what the fever dream Tan could be having now. Avendasora, the tree of life, was supposed to have all sorts of miraculous qualities, but none of the stories mentioned any sapling or any they. There was only one, and that belonged to the Green Man. Only that morning he might have felt foolish at musing over the Green Man and the tree of life. They were stories. Are they? Trollocs were just stories this morning. Maybe all the stories were real and all as the news of peddlers and merchants brought all the gleeman's tales and all of the stories told at night in front of the fireplace. Next, he might actually meet the Green Man or an augur giant or a wild black-veiled Aielman. Tam was talking again. He realized sometimes only, murmuring sometimes loud enough to understand. From time to time, he stopped to pant for breath, then went on as if he thought he had been speaking the whole time. Battles are always hot, even in the snow. Sweet heat, blood heat, only death is cool. Slope of the mountain, only place didn't stink of death. Had to get away from the smell of it, the sight of it. Heard a baby cry. Their women fight alongside the men sometimes, but they had let her come. I don't give birth there alone. Before she died of her wounds, covered the child with her cloak, but the wind blown the cloak away. Child blew with the cold, should have been dead, crying there, crying in the snow. I just couldn't leave a child. No children of our own. Always knew you wanted children. I knew you'd take it to your heart. Kyrie, yes, lass, Rand is a good name. A good name. Suddenly, Rand's legs lost a little strength they had. Stumbling, he fell to his knees. Tam moaned with the jolt, and a strip of blanket cut into Rand's shoulders. But he was not aware of either. If a Trolloc had leaped up in front of him right then, he would have just stared at it. He looked over his shoulder at Tam, who had sunk back into wordless murmurs. Fever dreams, he thought dully. Fevers always brought bad dreams, and this was a night for nightmares, even without a fever. You are my father, he said aloud, stretching back a hand to Tam, and I am... the fever was worse, much worse. Grimly, he struggled to his feet. Tam murmured something, but Rand refused to listen to any more. Throwing his weight against the improved harness, he tried to put all of his mind into taking one laden step after another, into reaching the safety of Edmund's Field, but he could not stop the echo of in the back of his mind. He is my father. It was just a fever dream. He is my father. It was just a fever dream. Light, who am I?
Light.
Wow. Yeah. So I mean, wow. So that, it just makes it seem like, okay, we know. So now at this point, we know Tam was doing some traveling. Rand's mother isn't alive currently. Mm-hmm. And seems like he found Rand out there somewhere in his travels.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, man. It's that's actually a really important piece there, and even what really, in going back through and doing this a reread for me, I am amazed. I always remember the bits that Tam says. That really sticks out. Like, you're always like, what did he say? And it was a fever dream. You're trying to focus in there, but actually, there's a lot of stuff in Rand's thoughts where he's thinking in between the murmurings of his father. Total foreshadowing, some crazy stuff that he says there that I'm just like, holy cow, that's actually really awesome that is, woven in there. But yeah, his father is sort of says that. I mean, you can almost imagine that he, like, what other child would he be talking about? Was
right.
The only other thing you can think of is
they specifically say
Rand.
They specifically say Rand is a good name.
Yeah, they do. You're exactly. So they're talking about Rand. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know, man. It's he's an interesting. Tam's interesting. He's got an interesting backstory, and we don't really know anything about him at this point, other than he's got a mysterious sword, and he's having a fever dream where he pretty much found Rand.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, those are. I mean, again, we're only talking chapters 1 through 9 here, and I'm not that much further along anyway. So, but that certainly is going to be something I think that is going to be very interesting to keep an eye out on throughout the rest of this book. So, okay. So, some other interesting segments here. This is from chapter 8, page 118. Atrolic said the Murdral wanted to talk to me. I don't know what it meant. Land's heads jerked up. This is talking about what the Trolloc kind of said to him. He said, "You talked to a Trolloc?" Not exactly, Rand stammered. The warder's gaze held him like a trap. "It talked to me. I said it wouldn't hurt. It said it wouldn't hurt me. That the Murdral wanted to talk to me, but then it tried to kill me." He licked his lips and rubbed his hands along the knobby leather of the sword hilt. In short, choppy sentences, he explained about the returning to the farmhouse. "I killed it instead," he finished. "By accident, really. It jumped at me, and I had the sword in my hand." Land's face softened slightly, if rock could said to soften. "Even so, that is something to speak of, sheepherder. Until last night, there were only a few men south of the borderlands who could say they had even seen a Trolloc, much less kill one." So regardless of whether it's just luck or some skill involved or something else, whether that sword has some sort of a magical power or there's just more to Rand, his reputation is certainly can grow from this. So I think that's something to take into consideration.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's doing things that are almost outside of what you would think are within his capacity.
Skill set,
he's a guy who says earlier on that he's hoping to just only place in this year's archery competition. But now he's out here facing, these individuals, Trollocs and Murdral and whoever else that these were just, rumors. These were stories beforehand, but now their stories come to life. And they're horror stories, they're nightmares walking around his farm, and he's faced with those, and he takes one out. So,
yeah. Okay, so the last thing I have here, just something to highlight. Chapter 8, page 121. "It was you three the Murdral sought, and none others." Rand shifted uneasy, wishing she would not look at him like that, as if her eyes could pierce his brain and read what lay in every corner of it. "What would they want with us? We're just farmers, sheepherders." "That is a question that has no answer in the Two Rivers," Moraine said quietly. "But the answer is important. Trollocs, where they have not been seen in almost 2,000 years, tells us that much. Lots of stories tell about Trolloc raids," Rand said stubbornly. "We just never had one here before. Warders fight Trollocs all the time," Land snorted. "Boy, I expect that to fight Trollocs along the Great Blight, but not here, nearly 600 leagues to the south. That was as hot a raid last night as I expect to see in Shinir or any of the borderlands." "In one of you," Moraine said, "or all three, there is something the Dark One fears." "That's impossible," says Rand.
That's impossible.
That's impossible, yeah.
Oh man, yeah. There's something, there's something in you, right? Yeah,
right. And I mean,
fears.
I think because Rand is our main character, obviously, and we know a little bit about his now suspicious backstory. I mean, that obviously, causes me to believe there's obviously something bigger about Rand, which is why I titled that entire segment that. But I mean, I think it's interesting also that Matt and Perrin, they were after them as well. They're all about the same age, so there's something significant with all three of them.
Right.
But I mean, right now I think it's just easiest based upon where we're at in the story. I mean, as far as I can see with Rand, just because I haven't learned more about Matt or Perrin yet, but I think certainly there's something special about Rand.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, instead of following, Matt and Perrin back to their homesteads, we follow Rand, back to his. We followed him into town. We're going to follow him back out. And so that's the character we're going to focus in on. And I think you're right. When they come back, because we're about to jump into sort of our third segment here, the dream world, the dark one, and the dragon. And really, it's a discussion on chapter 9. A lot of dark elements, to it. But like the Trollocs, there's a pattern here. I mean, there's a pattern, and they were targeting specific places, and it looked like they were after maybe Matt and Perrin as well. And you just read that, so there's definitely something there. I mean, it's not just it's not like they just went after everybody's farm. They went after specific ones, and these were also the boys who saw the Dark Rider early on, right? They had seen it, and that they were wondering if others had seen it. They wanted to bring it to the village council, but they were like, I don't know. We're just, Matt's sort of the boy who cries wolf, and so we want to make sure somebody else has seen it. Well, then Perrin had seen it, and you're like, wait a second, what? Okay, well, let's see if we can get a few more people who have seen this thing. So these are the guys who clearly something special about them, but most clearly Rand is already elevated in our mind as someone who's significant. So
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, well, hey, that's we will find out more next time, right?
Yeah,
now that we're going to drive a little bit forward, but now let's just go ahead and dive into chapter 9. Then we can just talk a little bit, just very briefly, about kind of the first 9 chapters and where that kind of leaves us. So, chapter 9, Tellings of the Wheel. Now, this is where Rand is having a dream, and he's being talked to by some pretty dark. He certainly sees some dark things, right? He sees Trollocs, and there's like some voices calling out to him, "Serve me, serve me." The light consume you, Shaitan. And then he ends up kind of waking up from this. It is your destiny. A voice whispered in his head. Your destiny is something that keeps being repeated. And then Rand ends up sitting up, and this is where he ends up kind of having a conversation with Moraine, and they say, it's time to leave.
Yeah, I mean, so the beginning of this is really interesting. It's he's having this dream, and we'll find out soon. This is not. I'll just kind of stretch us a little bit here. That dreams are significant in Robert Jordan's world. Having a dream, and it's funny too, because dreams are significant in a Game of Thrones. They're significant in Lord of the Rings,
Star Wars, Harry Potter.
Visions, dreams, whatever you want to call it. They're a big deal, and you can use them to do some great storytelling. So he is interacting with this dream. Seems more than just a dream. It seems real, and he's completely shook by it. He's being chased by Trollocs, right? And as you said, they're calling out. There's a voice calling, saying "Serve me," and he ends up, throwing himself over an edge, so he doesn't have to face the Dark One. I mean, that's really what's going on. His dream changes. He's looking at Tar Valon, right? Before being chased and falling again, and then he's on a bridge leading into a city. People are gesturing him towards the tower. He tries going other ways, but the tower is always straight ahead of him. The crowds lead him onto the tower, and he goes in to find a Murdral waiting for him, and that's when, yeah, as you say, he kind of awakens. It's weird too, because the dream's kind of fragmented, and the more they dream, they're actually going to they'll remember more of their dreams, and they tell a story, and they're almost like a little bit of, gosh, I don't know, like it's almost like he's being spoken to, like truly spoken to by the Dark One here, and also that maybe he's seeing the future a little bit as well. And I'm just throwing that little tiny, tidbit out there for folks to enjoy, because I think like there's some really interesting stuff, and you really got to pay attention to what is happening in dreams. Like a lot of times, and I remember when I first read The Lord of the Rings, I was kind of like, all right, Frodo's having a dream about some tower and this and that, and it's whatever. It's a big freaking deal. And when I went back and through my second and third reread, I was like, wowzers, got to pay attention to that kind of stuff, because the author's using that dream. It's a device that they're using to kind of build the world and tell you what's going on. And it also, as you said, Sir Matt, it elevates Rand even more so as someone who is interesting. Now he was trying to stay awake with his father, and because he and that's what he kept saying. He kept saying, he is my father. At the end of chapter 8, like I am his son. I mean, he's reassuring himself as his father's laying there, which he thinks dying, possibly, and so he's reassuring himself of that, and then he drifts into this nightmare. Yeah. So, but the rest of this chapter 2 is really interesting. So when he awakes, as you said, sort of, he wants to tell Tam sort of what happened. He wants to ask him about the fever dream and different things. So Ram tells Tam what Moraine said about having to leave the two rivers. Tam says that Aes Sedai are tricky, right? That they are, that while they do tell the truth, it might not be what you think it is, right? So that same truth that they're telling might not be. So he's being warned about, avoiding Aes Sedai and being careful around them. So, yeah, he's got to be careful when he's around Moraine. Tam wants to leave with them, except that he needs time to recover. And so then you have Lan, who shows up, and they're basically kind of making the point to these guys that the Dark One is after you guys. Yeah,
we need to go. Yeah.
Right. So, a couple of things, I guess, since we're talking about the Dark One. You really have his minions. You've got the Trollocs, who are sort of like orcs, is what I think of them as. If you've read
exactly, I think that's the most easy comparison.
And something that would drive the orcs on, or the Trollocs, would be your Murdral in this case, or a Fade. They're sometimes referred to as a Fade, and they're scary dudes, man. When the Murdral show up, like, you can't move. You're petrified. It's that fear that you can't move from. I mean, here's an example. So I don't know if I'm having a dream or when this happens, but like I've had dreams where I'm like, I know there is something, like it feels like there's something walking into my room, or the door is creaking, and I know something's coming into my room and it's going to kill me, but I'm petrified and I can't move at all.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, what? That's how these guys feel when a Fade shows up, because you'll see like they're being told like run, and they just can't move, man. They're just like oh my god, they're stuck there. They're that kind of scary, and they have a presence about them that is, so the Trollocs are bad enough, but it's like the Murdral are deadly. I mean, absolutely just deadly, like when they show up. So,
and then the Fades are kind of like, I think of them as the things in Lord of the Rings, the
ring wraiths.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like right. Yeah. They again, they're black. They got their black hoods. They're on black stallions, black riders, if you will. So yeah, and they're super scary. So anyways, you've got that. There will be other dark creatures kind of show up. There were mentions and references to dark friends. in this as we started off, and you're like, what is that? There was a reference to like the false dragon, which I thought was really cool in Gai'don. So one of the things as we talk about this segment is sort of kind of a wrap up and looking back over these first several chapters and what was kind of cool or important. They reference the dragon, and we just read the prologue where they called Lews Therin Telamon the dragon.
Exactly.
And so we're sitting here going, okay, wait a second. That guy also killed all of his family, and he was a kinslayer, and the betrayer of hope shows up and is like trying to explain to him, heals him so that he can see the destruction that he caused. And then we even had two little prophecies or tellings, I guess, that Robert Jordan decided to put in there and show us that like it was foretold that the dragon would ride again on the winds of time. That's in there for a reason. It's super important that you read that before going into chapter 1, because now then, Rand, when he first brings up the false dragon, he almost kind of starts to like stumble, or he says like, there's a man in Gai'don claiming to be the dragon. I mean, a false dragon. Like God forbid you would, light forbid that you would say that this was truly the dragon come again. So you start to get set up this idea, and this really disrupted the people in Emond's Field. They were so concerned when Podon Fain, the peddler, shows up and he starts talking about this news. And again, Tom Maryland said it's old news. It is what it is. The Aes Sedai maybe have already gone down and dealt with this, or they are there, dealing with this. They're worried. They start to kind of think that maybe the path in which the Aes Sedai would take to get down to Gai'don. This is where you have to reference the map in the beginning of the book. It's fascinating to see where the countries are and where Gai'don is, and the path that the Aes Sedai would have to take from Tar Valon, which is their headquarters, and have to come down to get the false dragon. They talk about this. The village council kind of says, Tam explains later on to Rand that it wouldn't have been long. Like the village would have worried about it, but instead, the village council kind of takes it on as their burden. Don't you guys worry about it. He kind of says like everyone, they tried to save the village from getting all worked up over nothing. Yes, there's potential danger, but after a few weeks, folks would have realized, oh yeah, they're not gonna, come too close to us. That they would clearly take this route and this path. But it takes people sometimes, a little bit of time to get to that, to draw that conclusion. So the village council was trying to explain, because they're worried. They're not just worried about the false dragon. They're worried about the Aes Sedai showing up. This was before. We talked about Moraine being there, and once the Trollocs attack in the Two Rivers, Moraine is revealed. She is now healing as an Aes Sedai, and everyone's bowing, and Lady Moraine and this and that. I mean, they're kind of can't believe that they're in the presence of an Aes Sedai. And just a chapter before that, they were scared to death that the Aes Sedai might come by their village, or that the war would come close. And so they're sending out riders to Devon Rye and different places. And that was kind of cool, right? Because Matt wanted to be, they wanted to be on the guard. They wanted to be on like the watchers who would go out and kind of see what was going on in these other areas. They reference the other villages, right? So man, it was just that's sort of a, I don't know. It's wild when you start talking about the dragon or the false dragon. People just go crazy.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what it seems like.
I love it. Yeah,
that's what it seems like. Oh, just tales, and they're all. Yeah. The people of Emond's Field seem like they don't want anything to do with the outside world. No,
they're content. Yeah, they're content with all of their, basically their export, their import. They're just doing their own thing. They're also described as stubborn people. The one thing we're not going to get to in this episode is going to be the speech on Manetheren. And I think maybe we'll follow up right afterwards with that and kind of talk about the lay of the land here a little bit and the regions surrounding this area, because I think that's cool and kind of important. And they're just referenced. They're not really flushed out. I was actually confused when I first started reading during my very, very first read. I remember being so confused. I would refer back to the map all the time. Just where are they at? where are they going? And then they because right now we're at the point where they're about to take off, and you got to pay close attention. So that's kind of what we're going to do an extended edition episode just to talk more about it. But man, I mean, talk of the Dark One and here's something interesting. Talk of Aes Sedai, the Dark One, and the dragon, all seem to be big no-nos, don't they? Right?
Yes, they do.
Should not be talking about those things. They actually all seem like they're all bad, although we see Moiraine do some good. And but then we get a warning from she saved Tam, but yet Tam says don't trust her. So it really is great storytelling because we don't know what to do with this character Moiraine. She seems nice. She gave us a coin.
Yes. Yeah.
The Tarvalin mark, but what do we do with that? So that she's fascinating. I mean, absolutely fascinating. Just like what do they do with her? Because they're told left and right not to trust her. And actually, I think they encounter right after the Trolloc attack, Tom Merrilin. This is just some wrap up stuff. Tom Merrilin, when he shows up there, he also kind of lets us we're sort of like, hey, this Gleeman doesn't trust him either. And he's a well traveled guy. That's not just my dad who's been in the Two Rivers, or people here in Emmons Field. This is somebody who's been out and about, and he doesn't seem to trust the Aes Sedai either. So, I don't. Hey, one of my polls was it was just from last week. I said, Tar and Ferryman, can we trust him? Everybody agree with me on Patreon? They said no.
Yeah,
you
can't trust him.
You can't trust him. So
you better count your coppers.
Right. Yeah. Oh gosh. So yeah, and that's when they start to kind of talk about the different regions around, like you can't trust people from over here and over there. So yeah, the Two Rivers people are just they're stubborn, and Moiraine is actually about to give a speech, to these people about Manetheren and their heritage and where they're from, or where they're descended from, and the blood that runs in this land. So that's something we can kind of follow up on, but. I don't know, man. Things to pay attention to. That dream world, I think, is really important. I think, him running from it wasn't just running from the Dark One. He's running from the Murdral, the Dark One, but then he's also being herded towards a tower. And no matter what he does, it seems like there's nothing that he can do. He just keeps being herded towards this tower, and he can't get away from that. So that's something to pay attention to.
Yeah. All right. Well, man. I think it's now. And so now that we're kind of wrapping up here, should I go ahead and make my prediction?
Yeah, I want to. Yeah, I do. I want to hear what you got.
So because every time I need to draw upon my one power to try and see into the future, so this is gonna have to be post chapter 17, but I'll leave it kind of broad for people who haven't read that far, since I've read that far. And I said this to you. Maybe I'm just being naive here, or it certainly seems like Rand and Egwene are gonna hook up. I mean, that it seems relatively obvious that's what's gonna happen. Yeah. So not really to spoil anything, but certainly to tease something from the next episode. Let's just say Egwene, who is very eager to learn to become a wisdom, may do a little bit of training with Lady Moiraine, and Rand never felt so far away from her.
Oh man.
So there's certainly some. I think I got them feelings, going on. So that's what seems to be going on there. But that's just kind of my early predictions so far.
Yeah. So the gift of foretelling, seeing into the future and predicting what may come there. I like that. I'm actually I'm gonna keep we have a doc going here, so I'm gonna actually keep a list of Matt's predictions. So Matt predicts. That Rand and Egwene will hook up.
Yep, I think he's got them feelings.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. Cool beans. So that's kind of so right after we always make a little prediction, just going forward. Another thing that we will do too when we have these, feel free to send in a comment to our Gmail, thehornofvalir@gmail.com, which is again just the coolest email one could have. Or even an easier, like I would say, you do that pretty quickly. Or you can head over to Patreon. In our discussion threads, you'll see them. It literally just says Eye of the World Part 1 or Part 2 or whatever it may be, and it will list off the chapters that we covered. And there's a discussion thread there where you guys can kind of comment. And even if you want to comment on, obviously. Comment on what we have here. The next time, before we dive in to the next segment, we will read some of those comments and kind of go over those on the show. So if there was something that we missed, if you wanted us to talk about the interactions between Tom Maryland and some of the other characters, we'd love for you to send that in. We'd love to kind of, talk about those things. Like I said, right after this, our extended edition will take place where we're going to, head over to Patreon and continue the discussion real quickly, just a deeper dive into Manetheren, what it means, its significance, and it is extremely significant in the entire series. It's actually really cool, and it will kind of tie into our A Wheel of Time history look, our look back, our Hall of Servants sort of exclusive episode there too. So that'll be kind of neat. And we have a poll for you guys over on Patreon. You can go check out there. So it's the question is this: if you were in Gai'don, if you were there and you heard you had a man walk by and say that he and say that he was the dragon, come again, would you follow him? Would you follow the dragon or would you not? I kind of want to know where everybody stands on that right now. And you could even, again, you could have no clue as to where this is going, but, do you trust the dragon? Do you not trust the dragon? Would you follow him? So that's the poll over on Patreon there. So
perfect. Yeah. All right. Well, we want to thank you for answering the call. In our next episode, we will be discussing the Eye of the World, chapters 10 through 17.
Yeah, so absolutely make sure you get your comments in there and you send us some emails about that as well. And one thing here, so if you like our podcast, don't forget to subscribe, like us, and write that review. The reviews definitely help. We're really excited about this new podcast, and we're really hoping the more interest we get, the more people who are talking about it, and the more people who are in the club, like the bigger it'll grow, and I think it'll be kind of cool. We have some really good rewards built in just for people to send us something. We will read it. I think people who don't know us may not know that, Sir Matt, that we will read your stuff on the show, and that is a big thing for us. We love for you to feel like
absolutely
you're a part
we
of the show.
will. Absolutely.
We've met so many cool, great, awesome friends that it's just fantastic. So make sure you leave that review, leave that comment, or send us a message at thehornofvalir@gmail.com.
We will see you January 15th, and remember that the grave is no bar to our call.